This podcast is brought to you by IWI. IWI has been knocking it out of the park lately with new products. Just this year, I've gotten the opportunity to try out the Masada Tactical and Masada Slim pistols, both in 9mm and both optics ready. The Zion pistol, which is their AR-15 pattern model, and the Gen 2 Galil Ace in 7.62 by 39. From first round hits at 500 yards from a 12.5-inch barrel in the Zion to summer carry with the Masada Slim, I'm freaking impressed. I can't get over how many changes and upgrades IWI has made from the first gen to the second gen Galil Ace. Most notably, it now has a free float handguard. IWI supports the shooting sports at a massive level, and they support the podcast. Next time you need a new blaster, I highly recommend IWI. This episode of the Three Gun Show is brought to you by Isotune Sport, the next generation of hearing protection. I love their Ear Pro. I wear the Advanced or the Caliber models when I'm shooting, which are in-ear, and I wear the Defy muffs when other people are shooting, like rifles. If I'm standing to the side, there's a muzzle brake or something like that. All of those models have their tactical sound control technology, which allows you to hear range commands and what's going on around you, but suppress gunshots. And one feature I had no idea I'd use so much is Bluetooth. I can be a little set in my ways, so I didn't think I needed Bluetooth in my Ear Pro. But with Isotune Sport, you can actually listen to music or a podcast and hear what is going on around you so you're not taken by surprise. Because of that, the Advanced not only go with me to the range, but they have become my go-tos for the gym and walking around my neighborhood. They've lasted countless 30-minute sessions in 134-degree heat in the sauna, and they're still kicking. My hearing is important to me, and yours should be important to you too. Thanks to Isotune Sport for supporting the shooting sports and sponsoring the show. Be sure to check them out to upgrade your Ear Pro. Welcome to the Three Gun Show. I'm your host, Dave Hartman. If you're listening to this real time, hey, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all that good stuff. I hope that you were using this time to enjoy family and friends, and maybe evaluate your 2022 shooting season and plan for 2023. Part of that planning process is evaluating your gear, what worked, what didn't, and what needs to be changed or improved upon in the future. That leads us into this week's guest, which is Tom Stewart from American Defense Manufacturing. Tom gives us the deepest dive you've ever thought possible on optics mounts. We cover mount material, cant, cantilever, height, ring separation, torque, and much, much more. And I tell a fun story about how an optic mount really screwed up my first couple years of shooting three gun. It's a good story. So it hurts, but it was years ago, and I'm over it now, and I have better gear. And that's what this is all about. This is truly every question I've ever had about scope mounts and how to pick the perfect one for my application. And I know it will help you as well, because if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably interested in the same stuff that I am. Further, Tom has generously offered to give a scope mount to 4 lucky Three Gun Show listeners. There will be a link in the show notes that has details on how to enter at threegunshow.com/373. Just for listening to the show, you could be one of 4 lucky winners of the scope mount of your choice, which is really cool. So thanks to Tom for doing that. All right, back to planning for 2023. Maybe you also know of a junior that wants to get into competitive shooting. Well, it turns out Tom is an expert in that as well. Having gotten both of his kids into the shooting sports and traveling extensively for matches with the family, Tom discusses a progressive path of difficulty and responsibility from air rifles to three gun and how to train while keeping it fun. I really enjoyed that part of it. We spent a ton of time on that. Tom had so much to say, and I feel like we could have gone even deeper, but man, it's totally good stuff. Before we get into those two topics, though, we start out discussing Tom's path into competitive shooting that started with his desire to be better at his job in law enforcement, which I think is also a really cool topic. So 3 great topics in this one from Tom. He's got some amazing advice for professionals and civilians alike. This is an information-packed interview here, and I know you're going to get a lot out of it, so please enjoy. Tom, welcome to the show.
Well, glad to be here. We've been talking about doing this for many years, and finally got coordinated with to get together and do it.
I know. Yeah. 2022 is our year, man. Here we are.
Yep.
No, it's great to have you on the show, Tom. We've shot together all over the country, and I was trying to think of in preparing for the show here when we first met, and I want to say that it was like a 3-Gun Nation Eastern Regional, or maybe the 2A Heritage Junior Camp that followed, because you have a daughter, Maddie, that is taking a pause from 3-Gun, but was traveling with you all over the country shooting 3-Gun as well.
That is correct. Yeah, I don't remember the first time we actually met in person because, like you said, we both traveled all over the place. And I know I've shot with you at some of the, back when 3-Gun Nation was the big thing. We shot at some of those and also at the junior camps as well. So.
Yeah, and it just feels like I've just known you forever, I guess, because I see it tons of matches all over the country. And I do remember that we shot what was it, the Lucas Oil PCC match as well?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when you had your son and your daughter out, which was kind of cool. Yeah. So shooting as a family seems to be, something that's important to you. And we're going to talk about that today as well. But we're also going to talk about how people can choose the proper scope mount, which I think is something interesting because I have a lot of thoughts on that. I've messed it up in a lot of ways in the past and learn from that. And so I think we can save some people some time and money today, and then also discuss the family aspect of shooting as well.
Yeah, sounds good. I've made plenty of mistakes, and I'm happy to let people try and learn from mine rather than repeating them.
Yeah, so it's a tough thing. Like I've got an old friend that always said that the weird thing about people is they can't be told what pain is. They have to experience it themselves. But hopefully we can fix that today and help some people out and save them some time.
Yep. Yeah, I've had plenty of people tell me I told you so when I thought I knew a better way, and I didn't.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think we can all feel that one. Well, Tom, so let's take it back here. Let's start from the beginning. We'll want to talk about your practical shooting career and everything, but you were in, I guess, what people would consider like the quote the industry for a long time before you came to American Defense Manufacturing. So, give us a little bit about your background here.
Yeah, I kind of had a very convoluted way of getting into the competition shooting side of this, and then now I guess would be technically my third career actually in the shooting industry. I guess my involvement with firearms started, when I was very young, basically hunting and having fun living out in the country for a little while. Summer vacations were spent burning up bricks of .22 long rifle ammo, learning and having fun doing that. From there, 17, I joined the military, so kind of shooting from that point on. I went down to Fort Benning was no longer fun. It was more of a work activity. And that's kind of where it's been ever since. I transitioned from there into law enforcement. Did law enforcement for 27 years before retiring from that. During that law enforcement career, obviously, I carried a gun for work quite a bit. Transitioned into some tactical side of law enforcement for some specialized training, became an instructor myself, and did a lot of teaching for my agency and then other agencies around the country as well. So through that, I was interested in improving my capabilities and skills. That's when I kind of started to dabble into the competitive side. My first attempt at competitive shooting was then probably in the very early 90s. I found a thing called IDPA. Went and watched one of theirs to try and figure out what I needed to do to start doing it, and was very turned off by the people that were running the match and participating in it, so I never went back. So I kind of stalled out there and didn't do anything farther with the competition side of it. And then I think it was 2003, I went through a sniper school and graduated from that. Upon completion of that, I determined I wanted to continue to increase my skills and found a range that was semi-local to me that had long-range shooting. From there, I went through the process of meeting some of the members and seeing some of the activities they had at the range. That would have been Winnequa Gun Club in Lodi. And they are known internationally for having long-range shooting and the competition that they do there for both service rifle, match rifle, and then Palma. So I started hanging out with some of the guys there. Started shooting long-range competition. Did the first year using my bolt-action work rifle. shooting 800, 900, 1,000-yard matches with that, with just slinging a coat. After doing that for the first year, I actually bought the actual competition gear and started competing in Palma matches. So that's long range, 308 limitation, shooting 800, 900, 1,000 yards with iron sights using sling and coat, no supports. So that was kind of my introduction into competition shooting, was that type of shooting. So very focused on the mechanics of shot fundamentals, along with the mechanical reloading aspect of it, because ammunition at that kind of a match is very, very critical. From there, I kind of branched out and started shooting service rifles. So that was with an AR variant. Again, it was more kind of the competition, more traditional Olympic style shooting. So you're shooting 200 yards offhand, 300 yards sitting, and then 600 yards prone. From there, also at Lodi, while I was there shooting all those types of matches, I became introduced to USPSA because they were running those matches at the same range. Decided to start shooting USPSA again to improve my skills for work. Went to the first one of those, thought I was fairly good with a pistol and kind of knew what I was doing, and basically got my ass handed to me by some kids and old men. So rather than doing what a lot of people do of getting, embarrassed and never coming back, it just kind of motivated me that there was a lot more out there that I needed to learn. Kept going back, reading stuff, learning from other people, going through that USPSA side of it. And from there, found out about 3-gun, kind of learned about that because they were running a few 3-gun matches, around the country at the time, and a couple of them that were smaller ones local to me. But my primary introduction to that during that time was probably the same as a lot of people, was 3-Gun Nation on TV. So I bought the FN shotgun because that's what everybody used on 3-Gun Nation, or at least what all the commercials said they used on 3-Gun Nation. And then found when they had a local match at Lodi, signed up for that and participated in that with basically my duty iron-sighted AR that I carried in the trunk of my squad, and then the Glock pistol that I'd been using for USPSA, and then that FN shotgun. From there, it kind of went downhill because I became majorly addicted to that, and it just kind of spiraled out of control from there.
Yeah, the addiction thing is pretty easy to do. Like it's a slippery slope, man. Once you get hooked on it, like just keep going. Well, man, wow, that's interesting. So all this time I've known you, like I knew that, you shot multiple disciplines, but I guess I didn't know about the Palma start of it and everything as well. So that and service rifle, so they're, what we would consider now like traditional type rifle competitions, I guess traditional. And to me, they seem like really slow, and I don't know if I have the patience for them. But I recognize that you probably learned a ton of fundamentals in that discipline, and maybe the concentration portion of it is something beneficial to a lot of people. But do you feel like that kind of stuff helps you with normal 3-gun matches that we shoot today?
No, immensely. I mean, a lot of people that shoot 3-gun, you see when they start, they kind of pick up the fast hose or bay stuff, but then sit there and struggle with, true rifle targets. I mean, even if they're not at distance, if a skinny Sammy is 75 yards, you'll see a lot of people that are out there having fun, or, in their first couple of years, and seem like they're doing okay when you watch on the base style stuff. But when it comes to that type of, true rifle shooting, they really suffer because that's not an area that they have a lot of experience with. They've had a lot of practice or spent a lot of their practice time focusing on, where that was my primary focus before. So when I first started in the 3-gun, I mean, the rifle was definitely my strong suit, especially when I got to doing shooting like that, because that was kind of what I had done for the last 8 years, just religiously doing that. So I was very comfortable with that and very familiar with it. So that helped me a lot. And going from having that precision background, I mean, that's also how I started my kids shooting, was that type of shooting. So it's much easier to get people to speed up than it is to get them to slow down for accuracy. So that was one thing that I didn't really struggle with myself or with, Madeline when she started, was, being able to hit the long range targets or settle in or build a good position, or the breath control or trigger fundamentals and all that kind of stuff, because that was kind of naturally already there. More of my struggle with her was getting her to know what an acceptable sight picture was and an acceptable, trigger squeeze was, to hit the target that you needed to.
Right.
So hurl it was more building the speed into it rather than it seems most people it's the exact opposite. Everybody starts out, spraying and praying and running fast, and you got to fight with them to get them to slow down to hit.
Yeah, that's definitely how I started. It's just like, two anywhere, I can do that.
Yep.
Yeah, I specifically remember the very first 3-gun match I went to. We had, I'm trying to remember the numbers here. So we had like 20 pepper poppers in front of us, and I had a Glock 17, and I had a 2-round extension, 2-round extension on it, right? So 19 rounds, and I was like, can I load one in the chamber, and then I'll have enough for each popper? And now, that was my very first match, and now I understand how naive and silly that is to think that way, because I was definitely hosing, and obviously had to use 3 mags on that array right there, but. Yeah,
you didn't need the Barney round. You needed the extra mag in your back pocket.
100%. Yeah, and then one on the ground and all that stuff. Yeah, that's for sure. It's kind of funny how your brain works. In the early days, but yeah, that's super interesting, Tom. So I guess if people asked me okay, so Tom Stewart coming up to shoot. What's his strong suit? I would say rifle for sure. And now, knowing your background and experience totally makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, I don't shoot as much as the last couple of years, probably most people don't, for multiple reasons.
Yeah.
But going through 3-gun, as I kind of progressed through that, I started shooting 3-gun in 2011. So as I progressed through that and, practiced different skills, I would say towards the end, from lacking as much rifle practice as I used to get. Mm-hmm. Shotgun was probably my strongest suit, both shooting and loading it, because that's what I spent more time practicing and doing and what my focus was on.
Yeah.
Where the rifle I kind of backed off from. I still shot it, both for work and for, actual practice for competitions and that kind of stuff, but not at the level that I used to. Because when I was just shooting the long-range competition, and that was my focus, with the U.S. team and everything else for that, I was practicing once a week with a group of people on every Wednesday morning up there shooting at 1,000 yards.
Huh.
And doing that, shooting at a distance like that, there's a portion of it that's math mechanical, for the elevation of that, but wind, in my judgment or my experience with it, is more of an art than it is anything math.
Yeah.
You can use, when I first started, I bought the Kestrels and I bought all the extra things like that to try and get the math formula to tell me where to hold for wind. But I soon stopped taking that thing even out of the bag. It'll give you a baseline, but there's a lot more to it with that, with me reading the Mirage, because between you and the 1,000-yard line, the wind can be doing a lot of different things. So it was more every week shooting that so that you got comfortable with it and you kind of knew how it felt, how it looked, and then how that actually affected your bullet and the impact and that kind of stuff. That was the only way I got good at that and stayed good, is when you continually shot it all the time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think it is, I don't think it's like a bicycle. I think you got to keep at it. It's probably like weightlifting, take a couple weeks off, you lose some pounds on your max. But so I think it was 2021. I was doing a lot of spotting for my friend Forrest here in Cheyenne when he was zeroing, getting ready for matches and stuff like that, because my match schedule was reduced. But in Wyoming, we've got a lot of wind, and specifically in Cheyenne, seems like we have a windy season. And when he's preparing for Texas 3-gun, I'm sitting there on the glass. I started noticing this hill has this feature that the wind is acting on. This hill has this feature. This little mound has this feature, and that kind of thing. And you start to look at the what the dirt's doing and what the grass is doing and things like that. And I do agree. I'm not nearly as well versed in long range shooting, but I do agree that it is kind of like a qualitative sort of thing rather than something that you can just go and put a number on and call it from there. It does seem like it has a lot of feel to it.
Yep, I would agree.
So, okay, something you said earlier really piqued my interest. You said I got my butt kicked, but by a bunch of kids and old men. But I came back and I can't count the number of people that I've seen get their butts kicked, law enforcement or civilian, and just never come back. It's like, oh, that guy seemed pretty cool, but he lost, and then we never see him again. It's kind of a bummer. What made you come back? Like, what is the differentiator there? I always try to figure it out.
I guess just being humble and eating your ego.
Yeah.
I mean, my goal was to be better. And obviously these people shooting the USPSA were better than I was. And the only way to get better was to find out what they were doing. I mean, and that's what I did. I mean, I tried bringing lots of other people with me. I mean, I brought numerous coworkers and that stuff out to USPSA because the nice thing about USPSA is, I mean, for duty, they let you wear your actual street belt. So it's kind of nice. They don't have to come out with a bunch of different equipment or buy different holsters. And if they wear their work rig, they can come out and shoot, in production with it. So that worked out very nice for being able to get people to come out. So I'd shoot with different people at the range, and they'd either like the way I shot or like some of the stories I told about competitions and want to come along and try and learn and be part of that as well. And I didn't have a single one that I took with me that ever went back or carried on.
Man.
It just mattered. I mean, some of it's time. I mean, and a lot of the people there, there's money and time involved with it, doing it as a recreation, where most of the people on that side see it as a work task. So if they're not getting paid their hourly wage or having to burn, some of their vacation time or time away from their family to go do it, it's not as motivating for them to do it. And then, like I said, the ego factor.
Yeah.
Nobody really likes to go there and, they think they're very good at things, or, they may be at the top 10% within their agency or, normal firearms qualifications. But when they go there, they're, finishing the bottom 20%. I mean, that's not a good feeling, but I mean, the only way to get past it is to just drive on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the truth. I never thought about it as like a work task sort of thing, like I guess, mechanics like working on other people's cars on their off time just kind of seems silly, but oh man, that's interesting. I never really considered that, but I do think there is that sort of, I guess I carry it every day. So it's like I'm experienced with firearms because I carry one every day, where it's like, you carry it every day, but do you use it every day? And I can't remember if I've told this story on the show before, but back when I first got started in shooting, I was working at Lockheed Martin. We had a range there on the plant that was had its own access and everything, so it wasn't really like you could go through the plant with guns or anything. You had to go a different way, but it was a great range. So we had bays, pistol bays, shotgun stuff, 300-yard range, stuff like that. And so I'm out there on an off day shooting with my buddy Bill. And it's just the two of us on the range, and I noticed that there's a truck behind us and a guy watching us, and it was one of the guys from plant security because they had different access, and I guess it was just like slow time, so he wanted to come see what we're doing. And so, me being me, I just went up and started talking to him and explained we're shooting a USPSA classifier. This is what we're doing right here. And then I asked him if he wanted to shoot it, knowing that he would probably say no because he's working, right? But his response I thought was kind of interesting. He's like, no, it's okay. We shoot all the time. And I was like, oh, really? Because I knew that that the plant protection people shot at the range, but I didn't know the cadence. And so I just said, oh, really? And he says, yeah, we have to qualify every 6 months. I was like, oh, God, that's not all the time, man.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and that varies greatly from department to department. I mean, I was lucky for the agency that I used to work for. We were able to build a fairly strong firearms program. So, I mean, we had the opportunity to shoot 8 times a year. Mm-hmm. And then it comes down to also the fact that, even when some of them are getting paid to come out and shoot, it's a chore to get them to do it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because it's like doing your annual HR paperwork, right? Like it's just a task that is keeping you from doing your actual job.
Yep. And there's also a kind of a stigma in that community as well that the competition shooting isn't real.
Yeah.
So there's, some stigma there that, when they see people doing other things that are maybe higher performing or, skill levels they don't have, it's very easy to just, write that off and say, oh, that's not real. That's just playing games with guns, all that kind of stuff, which is true. I mean, there is a very different thing between competition and gunfighting per se. I'm not an expert on either one, so I just have my own personal opinions. But I mean, everything we do in competition, the weapon manipulation, building all the fundamentals. I mean, competition shooting and tactical shooting are very similar. It's just the ability to execute the core fundamentals while tasking to do other things. Competition is tasking to remember your stage plan, tasking to move around the XYZ items. On the tactical side of it, I think the better you are at having all those fundamentals and weapon manipulation, ingrained in you, so you don't have to think about them. That just frees up more of your, mental capacity to process information and make decisions in a very critical time frame. So that's, in my viewpoint, the biggest, downside as far as the tactical shooting side is that, freeing up your brain so you can process information coming in and make appropriate decisions in a time when matters, to then be able to execute whatever your decision is. That's where I see a lot of people kind of freeze up.
Yeah. Huh. Well, and I guess I feel like, shooting competition would give you like repetitions in doing complex things and making shooting the reflexive portion, I guess, or like the subconscious portion. And then maybe that would translate over to like duty, where you could accomplish those other tasks of, finding cover or getting people clear, whatever you have to do.
I agree 100%, but that's just a very common kind of way for it gets pushed off of, I'm not going to do that. It's not worth my time type thing. That's one of the frequent excuses you hear.
Well, so you've been doing this for a long time. Like I think I got back into guns in like 2008, started shooting 3-gun in 2011, but I do, and maybe it's the circle I'm hanging in, but you run in different circles because of your job and training. Do you feel like the competition will get you killed in the streets, or it's not real? Training has. Do you feel like that's still prevalent, or do you feel like it's people are starting to recognize that, or what do you think? Or do you think it's just static? Like what's your thumb in the air on that?
Well, I think it's still a prevalent thought process for the people that don't really want to self-evaluate and self-approve. I mean, that's a very easy, come back to why you can do that better than me, because that doesn't relate to my job. I can do this, that doesn't relate. And that's just a very easy way for somebody to, kind of put that off and kind of do that separation and kind of self-protect their ego.
Yeah.
I think more people that are a little bit more critical thinking about, how they can improve their performance can kind of see through that and separate them, that they are two different tasks or two different activities that you're doing. But that the competition side can definitely help the other side.
Right. Well, and so you got into training, right, in your law enforcement role, right? Now, did you do that because of the competition? Did they recognize like, oh, Tom's showing interest in this, or Tom's proficient, or what was the deal there?
Well, I had a lot more interest and what I would say more proficiency than kind of the standard before I even started competition, just because I had interest in that. And I took some self-motivation to, although it was very unorganized practice, compared to what I do now, I spent a lot more time of personal money, practicing, trying to improve my skills outside of just the basic required department training. So that, I think, set me ahead and put me into a position where I was, more acceptable, or was able to get the firearms instructor position when I applied for it, which opened up more training and more opportunity to kind of influence other people's viewpoint and how they trained.
Gotcha. So if, someone's looking to make that same move, you would just advise to give, show interest and practice yourself and improve yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, being an instructor, in my opinion, you need to be able to perform. I mean, to be able to perform and demonstrate. Otherwise, you're not going to get much respect from people to listen to you and try and follow. I mean, if you're an instructor that just sits up there and talks and preaches, do it this way, but is never able to or never demonstrates in front of students and can't actually perform what they're trying to teach, it doesn't motivate people to really follow your lead or listen to you, because they don't have a whole lot of reason to give credit to what you're saying.
Yeah. So you have to like basically model the behavior you want to see out of them.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
So,
if you can do it better than most of them, and you're trying to show them a way to do it, so that they can step up and hopefully at some point beat you, or perform better than you, I think you get a little bit more motivated student. For one, that if there's one there that wants to learn, he's got a little bit more reason to listen to you.
I gotcha. Well, okay. So then you were able to make the transition into the civilian sector, the private sector for, in working with American Defense Manufacturing, and you do training, with American Defense Manufacturing as well. So what's your role look like now?
Oh, now it's kind of a little bit of everything. So I would say my job with American Defense Manufacturing is kind of split into three, in a normal time frame, three equal areas. So about a third of my job is I'm tasked with kind of nationwide law enforcement and military contract sales. So that's kind of spread out between just doing either phone or email contacts with them, answering questions, trying to fill what their department or team need is with the equipment options that we have that will best fit that. And then another portion of that is actually going and meeting with them and, conducting some range training days with them, providing equipment to them, some training to them to show them how that equipment can be used best to kind of fill their needs and what their team's trying to accomplish. So I travel around a fair amount to do the actual live fire demos for that as well. So that'd be about a third of my job doing that. A third of it is actually doing the competition side of it. So that's when I transitioned out of law enforcement. It would be hard to say that I could ask for anything more in a job, really. I mean, I was able to pretty much write exactly what I wanted to do, and it's amazing. So about a third of my job is to continue with what I used to do as a sponsor shooter for ADM and other companies, is travel around the country, shoot, have presence, talk with people, demonstrate the equipment, see if there's changes or improvements that can be made to our equipment based on, what we're seeing out there in the real world, which kind of falls into the last section there. About the last third, I would say, is new product development and testing. So if I see something or somebody asks me the question of do you have a product that does this? If it's a legitimate request or a legitimate need, then I have the access to be able to try and implement that to make it a real product. So there's kind of new products, and then bringing out some ideas that, I or other people have, and actually testing them to make sure that they're functional before we kind of reach the actual end goal of a production, consumer market item.
Wow. Yeah. I guess to most of the people listening, that is the dream job right there, right? Like that's a pretty good place to be.
I would agree. Yeah. I mean, now that I've been doing it full time since 2018, it's definitely work. It's not as much fun as it used to be, but I mean, I look back at what my old job was, and I can't complain. My worst day doing this is better than one of the better days doing that. So
yeah. Yeah, I would agree. And, we just went through like one of the strangest times in American history in 2020, and that was one of the things I just kept thinking about. I was like, God, Tom is so lucky. Like he chose that time to make the career transition, and he doesn't have to deal with the BS and going on in Wisconsin at this time. So good for you, man.
Yeah, it was like I said, it was that whole convoluted way of getting in the industry. I mean, even getting into the sponsored thing. I mean, my start into contact with American Defense Manufacturers, me and Madeline were shooting a 3-gun match up at Fort McCoy, a military base here in Wisconsin that at the time was able to open up the ranges and was running 3-gun matches on the base. So I was up there, and American Defense had 2 of their factory reps up there because they were going to sponsor the match. And we're up there to take pictures and see what was going on. And I was already using American Defense Manufacturing scope mounts at the time. So when they saw us there shooting, they came up and introduced themselves and asked if they'd be able to take some pictures of our rifles while we were using them, since it had their product on it. And that was the start of it. So I had contact with them then, and a few more contacts, and invited us out to the range to test some new products. That was about the time frame when they were switching from just making optic mounts to actually making their own rifles as well. So they had me and Madeline come out to the range several times and give them feedback on testing with rifles that they were running, and they just kind of progressed from there through being a normal sponsored shooter for them. to them wanting me to come and work for them. I didn't quite have the balls to leave my primary career to make that big of a jump right away. So I started working for them part-time. So I did that for a few years, and then kind of had the last little, I guess, political debate with my administration, and called ADM and asked if that full-time job offer was still there. And 3 weeks later, I was done at the PD and started my desk job here at ADM.
Nice. Well, that's great, man. And I'm happy for you. And I think it fits you well. So let's test some of that ADM knowledge then. Let's talk scope mounts. So I want to tell a quick story. So my very first Optic was like a secondhand red dot, because this was years and years ago, and I didn't have a ton of money, and optics were expensive, and there wasn't necessarily the players that were in the market, and so I was like, oh yeah, well, red dot, I can use that for my defensive gun that I also shoot 3-gun with, and it'll be good enough for limited division. And man, I had the worst time with that thing, and I was convinced the optic was broken. I was convinced the rifle was messed up. Went through different barrels and stuff like that. And what it was is I'm thinking it is aim point comp M2, I believe. And so it had like the tension screw on there that you twist and then it clicks, twist, then it clicks. And that thing would back off, and it ended up being that that it would back off and then it would loosen up. And so then your zero obviously gets all messed up. And so when you'd shoot past, 80 yards, you'd hit nothing. And so I recognize that I spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars just throwing lead down range, being frustrated, looking like an idiot, which again, that's that ego portion, right? And not being able to hit the targets or complete stages and timing out and stuff like that because of a freaking scope mount. So that really set in my mind that is one of the most important things that I can get right when I'm talking about like a rifle / optics package. And it just solidified it in my head. So I hope people listen to that story and take it away so they don't have to live through it either. But man,
it's a very, very common one. I mean, myself as well. I mean, when I first started in, the hunting side of it, it was save up money and that stuff, buy yourself this really nice Remington 700, spend $800 or $900 for this nice bolt action that you've been waiting for the last couple of years or whatever. You get that and you blow all your money on that. So then you go to, buy the Walmart Tasco special, bubble pack, scope. Yeah, it comes with the rings and everything, for $89 to throw on there. You can't figure out why it doesn't work. I mean, it's a whole package. Everything works together. I mean, your package is only going to be as strong as the weakest link. And it's real easy to kind of gloss over the non-glamorous parts, whether that be the scope or the mount or whatever it is. Or even the ammunition. Even if you spend all the good money on all the other parts, you feed it the cheapest ammunition that you can buy, you're going to get that results.
Yeah, that Remington 700 story reminds me, I had a friend, Seth, that I brought out to the range, and he was sighting in his elk hunting rifle, and finally, after shooting a box and not being able to zero it, he's like, hey, take a look at this. And I just touched the mount, and you could feel the nuts rattling. I'm like, bro, like this thing's been loosening up this whole time. And yeah, man, it's super common.
Yeah, so all preparation and getting the whole system to work together.
Yeah, for sure. So ADM makes a ton of different scope mounts. I use ADM scope mounts now on absolutely everything that I have, and I love them because I never think about them. And it's one of those things where it's like set it and forget it kind of thing, and I never have to consider like is it holding me back? Is there something wrong or anything? So I prefer to think about my stage plan rather than my gear, and that has really helped me over the years for sure. So I guess let's talk like tac ops or open real quick for like LPVOs. So ADM makes several different kinds of scope mounts, and I always see like a debate of what's better or what's worse, etc. So I know that there's different ways to split the ring. It can either be like split vertical if you're watching on the YouTube, I'm doing it here, or it can be split horizontal if you're watching on YouTube, I'm doing it here. And then there's quick release versus torque directly to the receiver. cantilever that is like an inch forward, inch and a half, 2 inches, whatever it is, scope heights. So there's a lot to deal with when you're looking at a scope. And I find that the more people I talk to, the more personal that it gets. So do you have like a guide or a way you would tell people to choose their scope mount?
Yeah. So what we can do is I've got several different mounts here set out, so we can kind of go through and explain the differences between them, and then kind of how that relates to how your body and your shooting style is going to interface with your gun.
Okay.
Because when we're getting into the equipment side of it, one of the things I try and frequently tell, especially newer people, because they seem to be the most gullible at doing this, is you're never going to be able to spend money and buy trinkets that are going to get you to finish higher. I mean, that's just, I was guilty of it too. I mean, you see whatever you're going to see on Instagram or wherever, and you want to spend the money because that's going to make me shoot better. It's probably not.
I wish that were the case.
Yep. The one place where you are going to be good spending money is to get equipment that's reliable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so it needs to be reliable and consistent. So it needs to go bang every time, function. And then whether it be your optic mounts, your optics, or whatever, they need to be able to perform at a position or a level that they're going to be consistent. Because if you lose the consistency in any of those, like you were talking about with that scope mount being loose or anything like that, everything else you put into it, all the other practice and all that stuff's going to be a waste.
Yep.
So you need to spend the money, and it doesn't have to be premium, but you need to make sure you get quality gear that's going to be reliable and function. And from there, everything's going to be your personal performance going to get you to gain the places. So part of that's going to be setting up your rifle so it best fits you in your shooting style. Because everybody's body is a little bit different, and everybody, carries the gun, shoulders the gun, puts their head in a different place. A lot of times that comes down to what they were originally taught and kind of what's now ingrained in their brain. Me, I'm a taller person, so you would think I'd be the one that'd be shooting the collapsible stock with it extended all the way out and all that kind of stuff. It was ingrained to me when I started shooting, nose to the charging handle. So that's still the way I shoot. So I shoot a collapsible stock all the way closed. Mm-hmm. So with me having my eye that far forward, I need to have a lot of cantilever, built into the optic mount to be able to give me the proper eye relief. Otherwise, I'm kind of rubbernecking and pulling my head back, which is a uncomfortable position and not natural for me. So it adds time and inconsistencies into my performance when I go up and shoot on the clock.
Okay.
So we want to make sure we get your rifle set up so it fits your shooting. So you had mentioned cantilever. So what we're talking about with cantilever is going to be when you have an optic mount for the highest consistency of accuracy. You want to have your optic mount just attached to the receiver and the receiver only. You don't want to have part of your optic mounted to the handguard due to the fact that can take some flex. The barrel with the barrel nut is mounted directly to the receiver, so you want to have your optic attached just to the receiver. So this scope mount right here is going to have a 2-inch offset. So I can have this base section attached to the receiver, but it's allowing me to move the scope 2 inches forward to allow for that proper eye relief, back here. We have other scope mounts that are going to have even farther. Let's see, I don't think I have. Oh, here's one. So like this one here is going to be a full 3 inches.
Oh, wow.
So you can see the difference in the offset. So you'll have 2 inches, 3 inches, and then obviously a type of a scope mount that will have 0 offset. So a lot of it's going to be based on how you personally set your rifle up, how you set the stock up, where you actually put your cheek to have your eye placement. So you want to have your natural shooting position and then adjust the optic to fit you so you can shoot in a consistent, repeatable position that's comfortable for you. So me personally, I use this, what we call the Recon X. So it has 3 inches of forward offset because I shoot with my nose touching the charging handle. So to get that proper eye relief behind the optic, I need to push the whole optic body farther forward. And on this one here, you were kind of talking about having the vertically or the horizontally split rings.
Yeah.
So this one here is going to be our Recon mount. This one here will be a Delta mount. So they're both going to be a 2-inch offset. These specific mounts here are both the 1.5 inches tall, so kind of what's considered a standard height. But the difference between them is going to be how the ring and the base unit attach to the rifle and hold the scope in its position. So with the vertically split rings, you're going to have a base unit that's going to attach to your rifle. And then from there, you're going to have a set of rings that are going to attach to that to hold the optic to it. So there are some advantages to this, because this obviously is a lighter unit. It allows you, if say this year 30 millimeter is the hot ring size or optic tube size, next year somebody comes out with something new that 41 millimeter is the new hot scope to have. Instead of having to spend $200 on an entire new scope mount, you can buy just a new ring set and swap it out, so you can use the same base with a different ring set on top of it to change that out. So that's one advantage to that. The other one is the weight. One key feature with any of these ones that have the vertically split rings is going to be how you mount your optic in there. So the traditional way of mounting optics is you're going to put them in there, you'll set your optic in, level it, you'll have your 4 screws that kind of come down in there to hold everything in, to clamp it into place. You'll do that kind of X pattern to even it out, to make everything nice and level and have an even gap on each side. With a vertically split ring, whether it's ours or any other manufacturer that has the rings that split like that, you cannot set the optic up that way. What you have to do is you put the rings in, set your optic in there, and then you have to fully torque the bottom 2 screws that clamp the ring halves to the base. You have to fully torque those 2 in before you do any torquing or any tensioning at all for the top ones that clamp the optic in there, rotationally. If you kind of evenly space them, you can have a small gap between the ring and the base, which can allow some movement.
Oh.
To take away some of your accuracy potential. So you want to fully torque down the bottom 2 rings, lock those ring halves to the base, so you have that solid, unit holding the optic in. Then you level your optic, get it set forward and back where you want it, get your crosshairs leveled, and then you clamp and hold the optic into the scope mount with the top 2. That keeps the rings and the base attached solid, so there's no slight movement in there at all. It locks everything in. It'll give you the most accuracy potential out of the optic in the mount system.
Interesting. Okay, so that I need to go remount my scope, and then
it's in the direction, but everybody skips it.
No, for sure. I'm only kidding on that. But so that I think is interesting, and it's definitely something that is counterintuitive, and it is one of those read the instructions sort of things. But I guess like in like the learning space or in the knowledge transfer, I've always seen like you only want vertical split or you only want horizontal split. And I guess like if you're in the horizontal split camp, would that be considered like why someone would say that? Correct. Is like they've just been mounting it wrong or something like that?
Yep. That can cause a lot of the issues that will come up with this type of a scope mount. A lot of it comes back to that improper setup and the improper use of it. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I mean, this is a very strong scope mount, very repeatable, very consistent. The Recon series is probably 70% of our optics mounts that are sold, even though we do offer the other one. So it's a very capable, very functional, very repeatable and consistent scope mounting system. But those are a couple of intricacies that go with any optic mounting system that uses that vertically split ring.
Gotcha.
So then going to the more traditional horizontally split one, so the advantage you're going to have with that, this base here doesn't have the rings in it right now, it would be the same type of a base as this one here, is that you have the part that attaches to the rifle and the lower half of the ring are all machined out of the same billet of aluminum. So they are one solid piece from the attachment with the rifle rail to holding the lower half of the optic tube itself. And then you have the traditional horizontally cut ring caps. So you'll set this on there, level your reticle, whichever technique you want to use for leveling the reticle. And then you'll go through and do your normal torque down of the cap here. You do that normal X pattern that everybody's used to. So the unit here is going to be much more solid. It's heavier, but it will have more strength potential and more potential for that consistent accuracy under extreme conditions due to the fact that it is made out of one piece from the section that holds the optic tube to the section that actually attaches to the rifle.
Got it. What is the weight difference? Do you know off the top of your head, or can you say like approximately?
I don't remember exactly what they are for ounces, ounce to ounce. But you are talking a noticeable difference when you just hold the mounts side by side.
Mm-hmm.
So I would guess probably an ounce. So it's noticeable when you just hold them side by side and you're just comparing these two units. Now, if you have a completely set-up rifle with a 30-round magazine in it that's weighing 9.5 pounds, and I put one up to my shoulder with one mount and one up to the other shoulder with the other mount, am I really going to be able to feel the difference? No.
Yeah. I had that conversation recently with bolt carriers. We were like weighing bolt carriers, and we got down to like 0.7 ounces, or not 0.7 ounces, 7 ounces. No, wait. I have that wrong. I don't know. Anyway, the difference was negligible. It was 0.7 ounces, right? And you could feel it. And so we like, wrapped them in paper towels and like, okay, well, which one's which? Did the switch around sort of thing, and you could feel which one it was. But I did the same thing as you did. I argued like, well, okay, well, and it's in the rifle, you're not gonna be able to tell. So yeah, it's
the only thing different with the bolt carriers is going to affect the speed.
Yeah, it's moving, right? Yeah, interesting. All right, so so is that basically like personal preference, or do you have like a recommendation on that? You said set like 70% or the vertical split. Yeah. Doesn't matter.
So I prefer the Delta series.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is my personal preference because it is just rock solid. There's really nothing that you can do. You can try and get this thing to fail, and you're really not going to be able to. So having said that, though, my personal 3-gun rifle runs a recon.
Oh, okay.
And that thing gets beat up all over the place constantly, and I don't have a concern or a worry about having point of impact shifts, because we know how well we treat those rifles, and you've probably seen me throw things around, and Matt will learn from me, and she's already broke one of her guns in half doing it. So
yeah, she's notorious for breaking guns, like tossing them like she's mad at them. Yeah.
So I potentially this is stronger, and we'll be able to maintain zero better and all that kind of stuff. But having said that, like I said, on my personal 3-gun rifle, which is probably the one that I use the most and probably have the most at stake with, whether it be prize table or just match finish, or just the fact that I'm traveling from Wisconsin to North Carolina or to Texas or whatever, and have a lot riding on the 3 days I'm going to be using it. I want it to be bulletproof.
Yeah,
I run a recon on that one, so it's not that isn't a capable scope mode.
Okay. Yeah, so I think I have a couple of each, and I believe the recon is what I use on my 3-gun rifle, and then I think the Delta is what I have on my 6.5 Creedmoor. And yeah, I mean they both work. They both hold zero, so it's good to go.
Yeah, and what you just brought there with the 6.5 Creedmoor, I mean, the Delta line, our original Delta, I mean, the one that has the NSN number and everything else on it, I mean, that was originally designed to work with the SCAR Heavy 308, because that is such a wicked recoil impulse on that. So that's what this mount was designed for. So it is definitely overbuilt. And, my 308 platforms, I do run the Deltas on.
Yeah.
It's just not that you're going to really cause a recon to fail or break or anything like that, but, they are built for the extra recoil impulse and the extra weight in the cycle. And so I do run those on my 308s.
Yeah. Good to know. Yeah. I feel like the, heavier platform probably would have, I mean, it obviously has more recoil, so probably would translate a lot more shock to it. Yeah. And then, I have the zero offset, the zero cantilever on mine because I use a PRS stock, which is much, much longer than what I typically shoot for 3-gun. So the scope has to be closer, or I guess farther back on the receiver.
Yep, I do the same thing on my large frames because the upper receiver itself is longer, so you can move the whole mount a little bit farther forward. And I normally shoot, like you said, with a PRS stock. I do have a couple that have a carbine stock, but on the large frames, I normally don't have to use a cantilever.
Got it. Okay. So I guess that's how you choose like cantilever. We talked about the splits. So then I guess quick release versus like torqued. I don't know what you would say, just like normal fasteners.
Yep. Yeah. So probably 95% of all our mounts, I mean, it's one of the things we're known for and have one of our original patents for is going to be our QD lever system. So with our lever system, you have 2 locking levers. They have a release lever inside of them as well, so they can't just pop open. On the other side of it, for the adjusting for the tension, we have a nut that drops inside of a recessed cutout. I don't know if you'll see it on that one. But you can see on here that
There
it
you go.
has a recessed cutout in there that the nut actually drops into. So there's no way that this system can vibrate loose. I mean, a lot of times it's kind of traditional where you do the paint pen marks on your optic mounts and that stuff, so you can see if your nuts are starting to vibrate loose on them or having to lock them in or anything like that. With this, you physically do not have to do that, because to adjust it, you have to push it, pop that nut out of the recessed pocket, then you can tighten or loosen it to fit your rail, and then it drops back in that pocket. So once it's locked in, it physically cannot open, and the nut itself cannot vibrate loose. So it does have some advantages with that. It does add a touch more weight to it. Some people actually do use the QD function. Me, I personally don't use the QD function on them. I'm not popping my optics on and off very often at all. But it is an option there if you wanted to do that. But I do still use the QD due to the fact that it's either on there or it's off. We do offer a traditional type of a nut and bolt. We have one that we call the GI nut. Let's see if I hold that closer so you can see it or not. So you can see the nut on that one. It also has pre-drilled holes in it. So the nut on one side of the bolt will still drop into that recess. So that's physically limited from being able to vibrate loose. The nut on the other side, you use a normal torque wrench like you would any other scope mount. You torque it down. And then with our GI bolt, this is set up so it's pre-drilled for safety wire, because there are some military units or contracts that require that type of a mounting system, and they require that it be safety wired on to prevent any loosening, or so that if the wire is broken, you know that you need to service the unit or recheck it prior to duty use. So that system is set up for that. We do have some people that just prefer that traditional style, so we do have that available.
Yeah. Yeah. I typically, or I guess traditionally, I was like the bolt guy, and just kind of torqued it and forgot about it. But then my specific use case, which is, I create a lot of content, like I was constantly transferring scopes over to stuff. And so once I got the QD mounts, it made life much, much easier. And I'm constantly changing guns and putting scopes on stuff for photos, videos, whatever it is, different matches and stuff. So it is helpful in that realm.
Yep, I would agree.
Yeah. And then that way, if you're one of those guys that has multiple guns but can't afford a lot of glass, you can move it all over too.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So let's talk scope height. So this is what got me into ADM scope mounts. So you actually reached out because you're listening to the podcast, and we were talking about scope height. And I don't even recall who I was talking to at the time. This is years ago. But we were talking about the difference between like the 1.5 inch scope mount versus 193, which is kind of was the hotness at the time, and seems like it currently still is. And then it's getting even worse with like red dots in the tactical game. I can't tell what's a joke and what's serious anymore. So what's the deal with scope height? Like, how does that come into play?
Okay, so I've got 3 different options here. These are all going to be the Recons. So we have the Recon H, which is the 193. So starting a few years ago, that you probably heard 193 everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of the new hotness. Our standard one, which is the 150, which is kind of what's been considered industry standard pretty much forever. And then what we have here is a Recon M, or medium. So that falls right in between the two. So this could be a baseline of a 1.7 height. So what started the 193, I can grab one of my personal guns here, is trying to get a low power variable optic that will have the objective or field of view clear a laser aiming device that's mounted onto the rifle.
Oh.
So having a 1.5 will bring the scope, down here. I mean, you can move the laser forward, so some people put them all the way up in front. Kind of depends on your rifle setup. But you'll still see some of that optic or some of the laser body, obscuring the lower portion of your, field of view when you have it down at 1x. So that was kind of the impetus behind raising up the optics, is to get them up and over this type of an aiming unit. What was discovered, at least my understanding is how it came about, is what was discovered with that, kind of as a secondary advantage, was that you had a more heads-up shooting position when you're running the rifle, which instead of having to tip your head over, you're always trying to coach people to bring the rifle to your eye. Not bring your eye down to it and put you into an uncomfortable position, because under stress, you're going to forget to do that. You're going to be looking over the top of your sights, or it's going to add time into the whole equation of getting your first accurate round on target. So by having the optic itself higher, you're bringing the optic up closer to your eye and having to do less conforming your body to the gun and conforming the gun more to your body. It also helps when you're moving. So for free gun or tactical, a lot of your moving you try to do, or a lot of your shooting you try to do while moving. So having your head more erect and vertical helps with your peripheral vision. It also helps with your equilibrium, because that's how your body walks around all day long. With your head upright, you don't walk around with your head tipped to the side like this or back. So you have a more natural way of moving around obstacles and kind of interpreting your environment at the same time. So that was kind of the follow-up benefits for it, is allowing that. Also, if you're shooting with helmets or earmuffs, having your optic up a little bit higher where you can't push your head down if you really try to push it down like that, where you have physical obstacles with earmuffs or helmets preventing you from doing that. So the taller optic also helps in that realm.
Okay. Well, I guess that makes complete and total sense then. Clearing the laser aiming device, and then just becomes the benefit of a more upright shooting position. So I would say that, typically I look at myself as like, I'm pretty like go with the flow, malleable, and just work around the weapon, and but I have noticed like a benefit of like a super adjustable stock, a scope height that's much higher, and it does get more comfortable. So the more time you spend on it, the more you seem to enjoy it. And I've also noticed that my pistol shooting position has become more upright as well, because I'm not stuck in the like head down sort of thing where I would typically just translate that over from rifle to pistol, pistol to rifle, etc.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
But the only negative you hear with the taller ones, depending on your face makeup, is you don't have that real solid cheek weld onto the stock. It'd be a little bit farther down on the chin, and you're not pushed into it. So when you're shooting dynamic and moving, that's not really a noticeable issue. But when you're trying to shoot precision or long range, not having that solid, mounting point can affect that a little bit, or, throw a little extra, equation into when you're trying to build your position. And also when you're shooting prone, having the optic up higher, some people, again, depending on their body position, how they're, shooting the gun and how their body makeup is it can add a little bit more of an angle to your neck, where it makes it a little bit less comfortable. Yeah,
that's a really good point. And I think, if that is something you're running into, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think like a PRS Lite or one of the dissonant arm stocks that has the adjustable cheek riser can help out with that, because then it'll help you get that proper cheek weld. The other thing I've noticed in using a higher scope mount is when I go prone and I shoot tac ops, so I can't have a bipod. So now I need a higher magazine to make it comfortable for me to shoot, where typically a 30 rounder is perfect for me and my body. But now I'm looking at like a 35 or a 40 is much more comfortable. And then that mitigates that neck crane you're talking about.
Yep. Because that's bringing your shoulders and everything up higher. So you're kind of, tipping up so your back and spine is in more of or closer to an erect position.
Yeah. Yeah. You're using more of your body to make that angle up instead of just cranking your neck back.
Yep.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. So then, I messed around with the 193 for a couple years, and I've kind of just gotten like used to it, and I like it now. When I go back to red dots, though, now you're going back to that 1.5 inch height. That's the typical AR height, which I believe is because that's what like the iron sights were, like the classic A post, right?
Yep. What they call co-witness is kind of like the industry standard. So on a traditional, mil spec, with a fixed, front sight post, it's the height that dot would be at to co-witness it, looking through your front and rear irons. The dot would be centered in that, and that would be in the center of the field of view through the optic.
Yeah. Okay. But now I see a trend again where red dots mounts are getting huge, and I almost like forgot that changing a mount was a thing with red dots until they just started getting higher and higher and higher. And so what is the current state of red dot mounts, and what are your thoughts on that?
That is your current state of options.
Is this all for the same one?
Yep. These will all fit the T1 footprint. So you have as low as physically possible. These all are going to be our QD mounts. So you have as low as physically possible. That's frequently used if somebody wants to put a QD on something like a AK platform or something like that has the rail itself, where the mounting point is already quite a bit above the stock. Also like an MP5 or a shotgun or something like that where they want a QD. So that's where we typically see that one going. The next one in line is going to be the co-witness, which you're talking about, that 1.5. So mounting an optic on here should put, if you're running backup irons, should put the line of sight for your backup irons right through the center of the optic window, and then you can adjust the aiming point itself in there to match the bullet impact, but it should be dead center in the optic window. So that was the first start of using red dots. It was going to be that co-witness type of a mount. Mm-hmm. As things progressed from there, people wanted to not have their fixed irons, because that kind of came about when a lot of guns still had that fixed A post. It wasn't like all flip up, flip down. So when you're using that, a good portion of your field of view of having this nice optic to look through was being blocked by that chunk of steel. So the next kind of transition would be what they call lower third, 1/3. So now move the center of the optic window up above the iron sights, but you could still see the iron sights, but that lower 1/3 indicates that it should ideally be in the lower quadrant of your optic window. So you're still getting 2/3 to 3/4 of your optic field of view above the irons unobstructed. So then next step from that is going to be following that same, because 193 became the magic number in the industry. So that also followed over to red dots. So this brings that height up to 193, because following that head position while standing, shooting, moving, and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. That was kind of the next transition with that, to follow that. And then what's become also popular, we've had this, what we call our NV or night vision mount. We've actually had this for quite a while. It hasn't really been popular with civilian market until semi recently. That was designed with a military unit that was trying to get away from traditionally with night vision. What the traditional way of aiming was with infrared laser. So basically you had a red dot, but it was only visible through night vision. You weren't using the actual sight to look through. So which is perfectly acceptable until you start going peer on peer. When you have other people that have night vision, running around with your infrared illuminators on and lasers on all the time isn't the most stealthful that you're trying to be at night. So then they started to put some credence behind the ability to be able to do what they call passive aiming with your night vision. So you're using your night vision tubes, helmet mounted tubes, but instead of using IR illuminators and IR lasers to, designate your impact point, you're actually looking through an optic. And have night vision settings on that optic so that you can look through there and aim through your night vision tubes, through that optic, and be able to accurately engage a target without putting out any IR signature for somebody else with infrared to be able to see. So the extra height of that allows you, when you have tubes mounted to your helmet, to be able to get behind it, because with all the extra gear you have on, you can't get your normal head down onto the stock to get that line of sight to go at the lower heights of a traditional red dot. So that's why that is up so high, is to be able to allow you to look through it with your night vision tubes. For law enforcement, it also became very kind of relevant even before a lot of law enforcement teams started using night vision on a regular basis. Gas and gas masks were a very common entry item. When you're shooting with gas masks on, it's impossible to get a normal shoulder well to use normal height sights. So it's common there. You basically tip the gun, 90 degrees to the left and kind of push it out in front of your shoulder, and then hold the optics out in front and look through it that way with never even having any kind of a shoulder mounting point for the rifle. With this taller 233 height that's used for night vision, it also allows you to use gas mask and have an actual, buttstock in your shoulder, put your head down, it hits the gas mask, but you can still see through the optic and do a normal shooting and normal aiming technique. So that's kind of where the transition has gone with the red dots and the popularity for being super tall, especially with the popularity of night vision now in the civilian market.
Yeah, no kidding. Like you can do, hog hunting that's super popular, right? Because eradication is a thing. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that is one right there on one of my night vision SBR PD demo guns that I have. And then one thing that we added to our night vision mount, I wish I could say I was the guy that was smart enough to came up with the idea, but it was, like I said, we've had this mount out for quite a while. We had a guy from the 75th group just give us a random question last year as to why can't you set that up so you can use your iron sights underneath it? And there really wasn't a reason why we couldn't. So you can kind of see in there that we now have a hole ported in there. So that was originally, it was going to be designed just to be a pass-through. So it would be a view window to be able to use, backup irons, front and rear underneath through that. Change the location a little bit and size like 3 different times trying to work it out. So now it can actually function as the rear peak.
Oh, that's cool.
You can use it with the rear actual backup iron sight if you want to, or you have it set up there and then it will function just like a rear peep sight with the front.
That's crazy. So the optic mount is actually backup sight now. That's awesome.
Yep. You can kind of see it that direction. You can kind of see the backup iron in front of the laser, and then you can see the viewport that acts just like the rear peep.
Wow. I didn't know that was a thing. That's really cool.
Like I said, I wish I could have thought of that simple thing myself, but
yeah, no joke, right? That's pretty cool. So I guess then, beyond the special use cases of like gas mask and night vision, then like the high mount is like a personal preference, or is it like a flex of I shoot night vision, or is it just like the new products? So that's what I'm seeing.
The 193 heights I can see being, non-night vision and all that kind of stuff, having the advantage of having the upright head.
Mm-hmm.
I can see an advantage of that. The taller, the true night vision ones, the 233s and that kind of a thing, those are more of a hindrance shooting when you don't have all the extra stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
They can be shot. In most of those guns are probably shot 90% of the time without night vision being active.
Yeah.
But you have the capability to function the gun the same way when you're running with night vision. So for those, it's, I guess if you have somebody that has one of those mounts and doesn't have night vision, isn't shooting that way, it's probably just I'm trying to look cool. It'd be my guess.
I saw it on the gram.
It's really not a function enhancing feature, at least not in my book, unless you have the capability of shooting night vision or with a gas mask.
Okay, got it. Do you guys see any demand for anything higher than that? Are we just gonna keep going?
Not that I'm aware of right now. We get random customer requests for pretty much everything under the sun, higher, taller, left or right, or anything in between. But as far as being a functional use of something taller than that, not that I can see.
Okay.
But I wouldn't have seen that either. The long-term thing of 20 years ago either. So
yeah, that's true.
Because literally, when I first started, my first AR that I carried on duty was a fixed carry handle. And you had all the red dots that you could clamp onto the top of that. And those were all some people thought they were the coolest thing on earth, and other people, kind of ripped on them because it was so tall and you couldn't get a cheek weld. Literally those ones that were clamping on top of the carry handle before are exactly what this is now.
That's exactly, that's what I was thinking.
It's kind of gone full circle.
Time is a flat circle, man, and we just keep repeating ourselves.
Yep.
Well, okay, so one last question on height, and then I want to talk about difference in material. So I forgot about this in the scope portion, but okay, so we're talking about like scope height, right? So in any ballistics application, they ask like scope height over bore. Is there a like benefit or detriment? I don't know what the opposite of that is. to having like a higher scope mount, specifically again for like magnified scopes, does that hurt you, or do you just need to make sure you know that number is correct, and then use math to overcome it?
Primarily, you just need to know that it's correct and know the dope that you have for your rifle at different distances to compensate for that.
Okay.
You will have a greater change over distance by having a larger or higher number for the scope over bore. Because basically your zero, you have your line of sight where the optic is.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have this one that's a taller one, my line of sight goes straight through there, never changes. Light does not drop with gravity or anything like that. So you're going to have your line of sight that's going to start up there. Basically what you're doing when you're zeroing is your bore, however far below that is, you're picking a distance where those two are going to meet up, and that's going to be your point of impact and point of aim.
Mm-hmm.
So the larger the difference those start at, whatever distance you pick that they're going to meet at is going to have a greater effect. Say you use a 50-yard zero. And let's just say I have, my scope is 1.5 inches above my line of bore. Maybe that's small for an AR, but let's just say it's 1.5 inches above my bore. I've only got 1.5 inches to come up, so it's not a really drastic angle that I'm making that, changing the angle of my barrel to meet that line of sight at 50 yards. But now if I've got 2.5 inches above my bore, now I have to make a more significant angle that I'm aiming the barrel up to make those meet again at 50 yards because it started out higher.
Mm-hmm.
So where the negative comes from that is after you hit that initial meetup point, it's that steeper angle is going to carry that bullet higher above your line of sight before gravity affects it and pulls it back down. So instead of having, say, at 150 yards, your bullet's now going to be 1.7 inches above. It's could be 2.5 inches above. I mean, I'm just pulling those numbers out of the air, not
Sure.
out of math that I've memorized. But that's where the negative would come of having your scope center being higher above your bore center, is you have to have a steeper angle to have your line of sight and the bullet travel meet. So it can have a further negative effect of that steep angle of having a rise higher above it before gravity pulls it back down.
Got it. Now, is that something that can just be overcome with math and dope, or is that a concern you should always worry about?
As long as you know your dope and your rifle setup, it's not a concern.
Okay.
At least not for me anyways, because I would set the rifle up so that I'm comfortable shooting it and in my shooting positions. And if that means I have a 193 scope height, so be it. And I'm going to learn the data for that rifle with that scope mount and that ammunition.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's more comfortable for me at a 1.5, I'm going to learn that rifle data is going to be developed with that. So it's not like it's a huge night or day difference, like you're going to have a 12-inch difference of impact, between the two, where it's, a huge noticeable thing. It will be a slight noticeable thing, but it's not going to be any different than if you are shooting 77 grain ammo compared to 69 grain ammo.
I gotcha. Okay, cool. So, then last question I have on mounts then is material. So I know you guys do like aluminum and titanium. Other than like weight, is there any benefit toward one or the other?
Titanium has a advantage in thermal change because aluminum has a pretty good change by temperature, where titanium has a very, very minimal compared to aluminum change. So if you have your titanium, at 90 degrees and then you have it at say 20 below, the amount of change in that structure is going to be very minimal compared to the change that would be in aluminum. So that would be the one primary advantage of it. 99% of the mounts we sell are aluminum due to cost and a few other things. Titanium we're kind of stepping away from because the titanium products that we were using were injected titanium rather than a machine, because the machining cost for machining stuff out of titanium is ridiculous, both in tool wear, tool time, how long it actually takes to run in the machine, and then the raw materials, where if it's metal injected and then, just finished machined, for the tolerance, contact surfaces, that's the process that we were using. There just has not been the customer interest in it to sustain the manufacturing of it. So that's probably going to be going away.
Gotcha. Okay. So buy now if you need it. That's what I heard.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. If you really want the titanium, I mean, it is a cool process, very cool design, because the engineering behind it can be done very different than it can be done with other metals.
Yeah.
So it has some uniqueness with that. But we haven't seen the customer demand for it, be what we thought it might be. So it's going away.
So that's got to be a cost thing, right? Because if cost were equal, people would just go like, yeah, I want the lighter thing. And then obviously titanium is cooler than aluminum. But yeah, it has to be the cost thing. I wonder if that'll change with 3D printing, because years again, I left Lockheed a long time ago, but when I was there, we were just getting into 3D titanium printing and then finished machining from there. And from what I've seen, it's advanced quite a bit. But I wonder if that'll change in the future, or if that'll just always be that way. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know that Huxworks Safety, they have a 3D titanium printed suppressor now.
Yeah. That's, man, what a time to be alive.
Yep.
It's like the Star Trek replicators, make me a suppressor.
Yep.
All right, Tom, anything we missed on scope mounts, optics mounts that we want to talk about?
I guess one other thing that we do offer in a large number of our mounts is going to be MOA built into the mount.
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned that. I always forget that.
So
explain what that is for someone who doesn't know.
So both our Recon and our Delta line will offer options where you can get MOA added in. The Recon line will give you the greatest options. In the Delta line, we offer 20 and 30 MOA. In the Recon line, we do 20, 30, 40, and 100 MOA.
Whoa.
If you're shooting really long range. So what the MOA does is that if you're consistently going to be shooting at longer distances, we all know about getting your data and dialing your scope up to match whatever the drop is for your bullet at a certain distance. As you get out there to the longer distances, even if you haven't exceeded the ability of your scope's mechanical ability to dial on the dope, you're still pushing that inner erector tube to the very edges of the outer containment tube. So if you would have, say, had 50 MOA of windage previously when you were centered up in that tube, now you dialed it so you're right at the ragged edge of not having enough elevation to continue dialing anymore. If you're shooting 800 yards or however far it is with your gun, you've now lost the ability to dial windage to any degree. You may only have 10 MOA of windage to dial now instead of the 50, due to the fact that the tube inside of the tube, instead of being centered and having that full movement, is now pushed all the way to one edge and can only move a little bit before it hits the edge, and you run out of travel for the adjustments.
Oh, interesting.
So that's one of the big advantages of it.
That makes total sense, but I hadn't thought about that specific case, right? You always think about it being in the center.
Yep.
Huh.
Yeah. So the advantage of that is being able to get farther distance while still dialing out of your scope without having to use holdover. So that's the big advantage of it. Negative of it is, depending on what MOA you get, you may not be able to have enough elevation in your scope adjusting turrets to be able to zero at a close distance.
Mm-hmm.
Say you normally do 100 yards zero for your rifle. If you have a 20 MOA base, 99% chance you're still going to be able to get that 100 yard zero as long as everything else is lined up. If you start going to a 40 MOA base, you got about an 80% chance, depending on your scope, because every scope's got a different amount of elevation into it, that you will not be able to get 100 yard zero. You're always going to be shooting high. But if you're putting a 40 or higher MOA base onto a rifle, you're probably going to have a 600 yard zero on it or something like that anyways.
Gotcha. Okay, so the MOA built into the scope, the scope mount, starts you off with elevation for long distance shooting, and then gives you more adjustability, or gives you the full range of adjustability in your scope at farther distances. Is that right? Is that about right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So basically, if your scope was, say, pre-zeroed for your rifle, that it was dead zero at 100 yards, and now you were able to change them out, nothing else changed on there, but we put a 20 MOA base on that.
Mm-hmm.
Your rifle is now going to be hitting 20 MOA high, so you basically be equivalent to about 20 inches high at 100 without doing any scope adjustments. So now you would have to adjust your scope down that 20 MOA to get it to 0 at 100. So that gives you that extra 20 minutes of elevation that you can dial into your scope to adjust for longer distances out.
Gotcha. Okay. And so I guess then if you're considering buying a scope mount for long range, at what distances would you typically shoot where that would be a necessity? Is there like a rule of thumb on that?
Generally, we tell people if you're going to try and shoot over 800 yards on a regular basis, it's not a bad idea to have MOA built in.
Gotcha.
And again, it really depends on the optic that you put on there. Because some of the newer optics that are made for long range, they've significantly increased the amount of elevation that you can dial into them. So some of those optics you won't need MOA added in, as early as you would with some of the more traditional or lower, budget line optics. But also with those high-end ones, it allows you to throw that 40 MOA on there and potentially still get 100 yard zero.
Got it. Okay.
It's kind of a balancing act between where you want to dial and where you want to start adding holdovers into the reticle, and what you need for your minimum distance of the zeroing capability.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've definitely shot a match where I've maxed out the dial and then had to hold after that.
Yep.
So yeah, that does happen for sure.
Yeah, and I had one where 22 long rifle that I was setting up for kind of longer range shooting. I had put a 30 MOA base on that, and with the optic that I had on there, because with the 22 long rifle stuff, you get some long distance stuff, but you still have to be able to shoot close. With a 30 MOA base with the optic and the rifle that I had, I could not get the closer range zero that I needed, so I had to drop back to a 20 MOA base.
Oh, interesting.
To be able to get the close-in zeros that I would need for some of the targets that you have to engage with those. But it still gave me 20 MOA assistance at the long distance.
Okay. So when you say close in on that 22 match, are you talking like 100 yards or what's the distance?
I wanted to be able to have a 25 yards.
Oh, 25.
So, yep.
Okay.
Because with the 22 matches, it varies. So they use really small targets, and some of them are, in close. So I wanted to be able to have where I could dial to those and not have to do any hold unders for it.
That makes sense. Okay. All right. Well, I think that answers all my questions that I came with about scope mounts. Is there anything that I should have asked that I missed?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, if anybody does have any questions with them, feel free to email us, call us. I mean, things are crazy busy right now. So, I mean, in the previous days, we'd look forward to phone calls, and you'd have people waiting to answer the phone. Now it's getting better, but probably 70% of the phone calls we get, we are actually able to answer. The others were just busy with other lines or other emails or something like that where we can't get to it. So we're more than happy to try and answer your questions for you. We aren't 100% available every time you call the first time, but feel free to give us a call if you have any questions on them. Other than that, the directions are fairly decent, and hopefully you should be able to find some decent internet resources as well. Cool.
All right. So we'll include your contact info in the show notes. So if you need anything, have patience. Tom will call you back. So, all right, let's switch gears up here again. So we talked about, we had gone to a couple 2A Heritage Junior camps together, and I've shot with your kids before, and that's kind of something that you made a transition, I believe last year to, or maybe it was 2020, to shooting by yourself and traveling for matches by yourself, where you've always brought one of the kids out with you. So let's talk about that real quick, because I see a lot of people saying like, I'm gonna start my kids young or bring them with me, but I think that could end up being not a good experience if you don't do it right. So do you have like a method, or how did it work for you, and what do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
So I can't give you a definitive, this is the way to do it. I can tell you how I did it and kind of my rationale behind it. Mm-hmm. So I started my kids very young. I mean, obviously with my work and everything else like that, guns are a very big part of my life and a very big part of my household, both hunting and everything else like that. Both of my kids were out sitting in tree stands with me, bow hunting at 5 years old.
Nice.
I mean, it affects your ability to perform, because obviously sitting in a tree with a 5-year-old is very different than sitting there by yourself. I mean, I used to be kind of the marathon hunter. I would go and I would be gone for, a week and be in an area where there was no water, power, anything like that, being kind of primitive and spending 99% of the daylight hours in the woods, hunting hard. That's just not going to happen with kids, and your competition shootings, you're going to have a different focus on it as well. So with my kids, they started kind of very similar to me. They started in the long-range game, or the equivalent of a long-range game. So they were between 7, I think right around 7, when they started kind of formal training. That was in Olympic, so it's Olympic style. So it's standing, sitting, kneeling, and prone with air rifle. And it's an amazing sport. It teaches the safety. It teaches the fundamentals. It teaches, a lot of the communication that's needed, attention to detail with that. And it's a very low output, both in dollars for the equipment and in the resources that you need for a range. Because where we went for their teams to start with the coach, it was actually held inside of a classroom.
Huh.
They made special air rifle. So they're very similar to a target backer that you would see for a normal rifle thing, but it would go all the way down to the ground, and it just basically had a section of sheet metal on the back and then cardboard on the front. And the sheet metal is enough to stop the 177, lead pellets that they use for the air rifle stuff. And shot at, relatively close range, so that's not super high velocity. So you can do that inside of like a normal lunchroom or a normal large classroom. So that's where they held it, the training for that. So they did the official training. We did that, once a night, with the group team that they had. It was hosted through the gun club that we belonged to at the time, at Winnequa Gun Club in Lodi. We also did that a fair amount at home. Winnequa, the team there had guns that if you didn't have them, you could go and basically rent, or they would provide them. We ended up buying our own, so they were able to do dry fire and then live fire practice, at home as well.
Nice.
So that's kind of how we started. My goal always was to get her into USPSA and 3-gun, but that's an awful lot to throw at an adult, just jumping into 3-gun.
Yeah.
And my goal on this was to you can't have 0 failures, but I didn't want them to come across something under the pressure of a match that they had not seen before. So that was kind of my goal of going through the desensitization process or the training process, so that they weren't surprised or put into an uncomfortable position when they were starting, especially since I was starting them very young.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of went through that. So they did that indoor air rifle stuff. And then through that kind of transitioned with me going into USPSA. I would definitely try and start your kids on a long gun to start with, so they get some of the body mechanics of how they move with a gun and maintain the safe muzzle discipline while moving with a gun. That's much easier for them to comprehend and much easier for the adult to kind of override and control with a long gun than it is a pistol.
I feel like PCC's probably been a good addition to that for USPSA, right?
Yep, I would agree. Yeah, because pistols, even for adults that haven't really got their mind turned on, are very easy to break a 180 with. So both from the safety, and you don't want them to fail and have a reason not to come back because they were uncomfortable or felt like they did something wrong, or the safety is the biggest factor of it. So that's why I started with the long gun first. Gives them a little bit more to focus on, a little bit easier to control that until they really get that kind of as a forefront to their brain, is no matter what they're doing, they're always paying attention to the muzzle first, and then transitioned into USPSA with a pistol. And that again was a lot of just working on the fundamentals at home before we ever went to a match. So I wanted her basically to experience everything that would be thrown at her a match, in the controlled environment, be able to do single tasks for that task, whether that be the drawing, the clearing of the gun, moving around a barricade, a wall, shooting through a window, all those different things. They wanted to be able to focus on those as an individual task rather than just being thrown into the entire stage plan and doing 12 different things. And then that's when they forget about one key fundamental and either have a safety problem or just, have a meltdown on the range.
So, yeah, I can see how that would be a lot. In particular, what I do, I see a lot of young people in, in 3-gun, and it's definitely their like first competition. I feel like that's a lot. So I like the roadmap you kind of laid out. Now, my question is like, do you tell them like, hey, this is the ultimate goal, this is where we're going, you just got to do like these 97 things to get there? Or is it just you focus on the task and this is what we're doing today, we're having fun? Or do you even have a roadmap, just like let it develop organically?
I subconsciously had a roadmap of what I wanted her to do. But that wasn't always clear to her. I mean, because if it's not going to be fun for her and something she wants to do, it's going to be a negative experience for both of us.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I can try and force her to do it, but if she's not wanting to do it, it's not going to be performing. Her brain's not going to be, her mindset's not going to be in the right place to be in that environment. So it was always in my background of what I wanted, because that's what I was doing, and they want to do what I do. But it was kind of the stepping stones of going through that. And I guess I did skip one thing. I mean, before we went into USPSA, we did Steel Challenge.
Oh, okay.
Because, again, that added the timer aspect to it. It added the more people watching aspect to it. And it added kind of the transition of targets, which isn't part of the 3 and 4 position Olympic style shooting.
Sure.
So that steel challenge was a big stepping stone going between there. And that one we were also able to start with 22 long rifle. Started with a Ruger 1022, so you had a long gun again, and then you could transition from that and then start introducing the 22 pistol. We used a Ruger Mark II for that. So they got the pistol in there. So there they just had to work as, focus on, the timer, bringing in the speed aspect into it, the multiple targets, but without any movement. So we were able to kind of get them comfortable with that. And then the next step was a USPSA, where it kind of brings the movement aspect into the game.
Nice. Well, so the Steel Challenge thing, so I haven't shot Steel Challenge. Do you shoot with a squad there too?
Yep. So you'll have a squad, and depending on how it's set up, you'll have normally 6 to 8 stages. The stages are much faster because it's basically just the 5 different steels set up in different orientations. And you get 5 runs through. Each person goes up there and shoots them 5 times. Their best 4 are scored. Then they step off, you get on and paint the steel, and the next person goes up. But yeah, you would have a normal, 8 to 12 person squad that would be a cycle from bay to bay with the different stages for that. So
nice.
They kind of brought that whole concept, because that was one of the things with them and adults too, is the peer pressure of having people watching.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and get some used to that whole squad dynamic, and I guess like interacting with strangers, right? Like even adults are weird about interacting with strangers. Until the end of the day or the end of the first day, when we realize like, oh hey, we're all having fun. We got the nerves shaken off and everything. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Probably get some used to doing that, and so it's not weird when you step up to a pistol match. Yeah,
you just brought it up there about interacting. That was something that was not on my radar at all when I started getting my kids into it, but after they were into it for a while, and I started, doing more of the nationwide traveling and meeting other juniors that were doing it. And, now I pay a lot more attention to it. So I'm around a lot more kids and around a lot more people that are shooting as well. But the juniors that you meet around the country that are part of these shooting sports don't act like 90% of the other people their age when you interact with them. Because most people that you interact with at that age don't have eye-to-eye conversations with you. They will barely have a conversation with an adult to start with, much less be an active part of a conversation where they may be the only kid there and there's 8 other adults there. you will find that they generally don't participate in a meaningful conversation with that. There's a few exceptions, but 90% of the ones that are in the shooting community have been brought up having responsibility thrust upon them, accountability thrust upon them, and have to communicate with adults in a mature way. And it really pays off for them in socializing skills and the ability to go out in the real world afterwards, because they're comfortable with that and used to it, and can look somebody in the eye and talk to them and answer a question or ask them a question, where it seems like a lot of other, even young adults now, can't do that.
Yeah, I would have to agree on that one. Like, I'm not around a lot of young people outside of the shooting sports, but when I am, it's like drastically noticeable. And then to your point, I've even met siblings of junior shooters, and completely different way of communicating. Like you said, eye contact, speaking directly, being a part of the conversation, knowing that it's okay for them to be part of the conversation. And then, that gets the wheels turning. You're like, wow, these two grew up in the same household, and they have a completely different way of interacting with adults, and, they're relatively close in age. That's something that I've noticed. I don't know, man. I don't know how you would. I guess it's just exposure, right? Over years. But that has to be. I want to see a study, Tom. There has to be a study on this. I want to see, like, are they more aggressive in their careers? Do they have better interactions with people as they go through life? Like, there's a lot of people that were teenagers when I started the 3 Gun Show that are now young adults. Madeline's a good example, right? She's in college now. And so I wonder, like, as time progresses, if those people will be even farther along. I guess, like, I'm keep talking here, but I guess a really good example of that is Nate Staskowitz. He traveled with Lance Dingler, who was not a family member, right, for a long time, going to matches and everything. And I always thought, like, wow, this is a uniquely abled young person, at the time, because this was when I was first getting into it. And now when I see him as a young adult who's in the Army Marksmanship Unit, speaking to him, I was like, my God, like, this has just turned into, like, an incredible young man. And makes me feel old, but to, like, see these teenagers that we started out at the 2A Heritage Camp or whatever other camps there were, to see them, like, growing up and being, like, young adults, and how they manage their life is, like, really interesting compared to what I see outside the shooting sports. I feel like they definitely have a leg up.
I would agree. It's up to them what they do with it, but they've definitely been given the tools.
Yeah, fly, little birdie. Yeah, that's really cool. Well, I guess, like, the downside of that is, you get to know these young people in the shooting sports. They're around for all the matches and everything, and then they go off to college, and sometimes, Tom, they don't come back. So, life happens, right, to everybody, whether you want it to or not.
How many regular 3-gun competitors do you see come in as adults? They're there for 3 or 4 years, hot and heavy, and then gone.
Yeah. So that is definitely a thing. Amax and I were talking about that the other day, of, like, geez, even 3 years ago, we look at photos that Facebook's like, hey, you remember this? A squad photo? And you're like, my God, like, where are all those people? But yeah, you're right. It is like a typical 3-year cycle. And I was talking to someone at USPSA about that, and they said the same thing, that, their data shows that people come in and treat it like any other hobby, right? Like, they're in it for 3-4 years, like you said. They burn real hot, and then they move on to the next hobby.
Yep.
Working out, 4-wheeling, whatever, bourbon, making briskets, all kinds of stuff. So all those adult things. Yeah,
I would agree with that.
Yeah, it's tough though, because as like a human, you want these people that you become familiar with, that you like, that you enjoy spending time with, that you love squatting with, that, make you happy every time you go to the range and see them. You want to see those people around all the time. So it's kind of weird watching people come and go.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Then far as the training side of it with the kids, one of the things that I found worked the best, and we got the most out of both for the kids and for me as well, was to break it down and work on individual fundamentals or individual actions, rather than trying to just piece everything together and this went better here, but you don't really know why it went better or why this run. If you set up a mock stage and you run the whole thing, and they do it, pretty bad 3 times and then do it good 2 times, but you can't really narrow down exactly what the difference was.
Yeah.
By breaking it down into individual things, whether it's that initial target presentation, moving from a shooting position, engaging a target, and then quickly transitioning to move from that position to another position. Those are all things that you can break down and work on the individual skills. It really seems to pay benefits for the younger, newer shooters, but it also does it for adults as well. Because one of the key things we used to work on is making up the time when you're not shooting. You can only shoot as fast as you can shoot accurately, but you can make the most time on the stage and gain the most points or advantage in those in-between things. So we would work a lot of times on coming up and engaging one steel target and then going through the body mechanics of getting that hit, and then, weapon unsafe, starting to control the muzzle, starting the body movement to your next position. So that would be one skill that you were working on, isolating right there. You're firing the shot, making sure you get the hit, and then starting the whole process of the safety, the movement, the body position, and getting the body moving the right direction for your next position. Those are all things that you work on individually, and you'll gain the most benefits by focusing on those and kind of narrowing it down and getting the technique down for getting that moving as fast as can. Then you bring the next step into it of coming into that next position, of getting the footwork lined up, starting to pre-index the buttstock in your shoulder, starting to do the target focus, and then bringing the sights up as the safety's coming off. Again, working on those isolated skills individually rather than just throwing them into a whole stage, so that they can kind of perfect those individual items and work out the nuances rather than just kind of being expected to figure it out on the move when they're only doing it a couple times during the whole match or during the stage.
So you think like more practice for young people, right? So they're not just getting those reps at matches. Is that what you're saying?
Yep, that made a big difference, and it actually made a difference in my shooting too.
Oh, I'm sure.
I was doing it with them. We'd set up barrels, with a knockover piece of steel, and the drill for that one would be coming in. You'd start 4 or 5 steps away, and you'd move into it so that you could get your feet planted, get the gun up, and get around that barrel just far enough to see the target, engage it, then be able to pop back, like you're moving on to the next one. So it's working on several things at once, but it's not getting lost in a whole stage or a whole string of 10 different targets. You're focusing on that one, and you can do that with the shot timer. So like I said, you start at the same distance away, you get the shot timer, and then it's the time till they get the hit. So they can really see the difference of, oh yes, I planted my feet in the right spot, so I didn't have to adjust my feet to get my shooting position. Or if my feet were in the wrong spot and I did adjust, I was shooting off balance, so I missed the first shot. So it started to kind of prioritize or show the importance of all those little nuances of being able to do multiple things at once and how the sequence went, rather than I'm going to run this position, I'm just going to stop wherever. Then I'm going to, I got to turn the safety off. Then I'm going to bring it up on the side. I'm like, oh, my feet aren't right. I got to switch my feet so I'm comfortable, so everything just kind of falls into place. It seems like it's natural, but it feels natural because you practiced it and kind of pre-worked out all the mistakes.
Well, yeah, I mean, the stuff you're talking about is like all things that I think everybody has to learn, and maybe they don't do it consciously, but that is stuff you have to learn. So, I don't have kids, but I would imagine that it can sometimes be hard to keep them focused or motivated. So how do you keep practice fun so they actually want to go and do that?
Not make it too long. Try not to make it negative. I mean, I say that, but my kids and my wife both tell me I'm very, motivated and very authoritative. I guess that kind of comes from how I'm used to coaching,
Yeah.
teaching law enforcement, that kind of stuff. It's not as touchy-feely. It's do this, do this. I told you to do this. You didn't do it. Do it right, type thing.
Do it again.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not going to say I never did that, because I would try not to, but that's obviously not the best technique.
Yeah.
It was mostly doing more practice, shorter durations. So it wasn't just going out there and hammering it out for 6 hours, getting uncomfortable. We go for 2 hours. Go and do some position shooting so they get comfortable. Get used to the zero at some longer distances or mid-range steel or something like that, and then work on some of those movement drills like we were just talking, and then finish it up with something else that was fun. Some fast stuff on paper, or work on something else, and try and come up with 2 or 3 things that are going to be your focus, but not make it like, I'm just going to do this on Saturday. We're going to be there from 8 a.m. till 4 p.m. And your brain shuts off after a little while, and especially if you make a few mistakes and hit a hiccup spot, you can only work so long out before you totally shut everything down.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can't even do that.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. So any other tips there if people want to get their young people into the shooting sports?
I would also say make sure you take them some matches beforehand. I mean, both my kids came to matches with me, learned the whole reset process, and all the dynamics of everything that's going on there prior to them shooting. You're trying to eliminate some of those stressors so that you're only adding a couple of extra things on at a time. If the first time they come to the range and the first time they're around 15 people on a squad, and the first time they're hearing a beep, and the first time they're trying to figure out how to reset and what they're supposed to do here and how to keep track of shooting orders and score and tape and all that kind of stuff. If they're trying to do that all the same day, they're trying to shoot their match, it's going to get overwhelming. It gets overwhelming for adults. You see them kind of go into mental lockdown, and you're trying to prevent those, kind of stressful, traumatic moments for the kid where he's like, no, I had a shitty day today. I don't want to go back next time. I'm done. I want to go play soccer or do something else. Yeah,
no kidding. Yeah, that's a really good point, is like, I guess, removing the mystery of it, right? So they know what to expect when they go. So they're not nervous about what to expect. They only have to concentrate on like their performance, right? Because they know that I've been with Dad before. I know where we're going. I know we're going to stand on the dirt. I know where we're going to have to pick stuff up, things like that.
Yep. And I made sure I expressed it to Madeline. I mean, a lot in the beginning, probably not so much in the end, but I mean, it did not matter. I mean, we went into it, telling her, I expect you to finish last. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what we expect. We just want you to go through, be safe, and learn the process. I mean, so that's how we started. I mean, there should be a couple of YouTube videos out there. I mean, like, we're first shooting her first 3-gun match when she was 11. I mean, it was not super fast, but it was just, go through the process, hit all your points, remember the safety processes and muzzle discipline and everything else like that. And luckily, I mean, that's when I was fairly new at it as well when she started. So I didn't have the gear quality that I did now. So we had practiced malfunctions. So, I mean, you'll see the stage that's on YouTube. I mean, she has a rifle malfunction in it, and she went through and cleared it. And, afterwards, so the ROs and some of the other people watching, made comments to her about how she cleared the malfunction better than most adults do. Yeah. And so just trying to set them up for success so that it's not experiencing something new while they're in the middle of the stage with people watching them.
Nice. Well, it's really cool that you had that experience. And then, from my observation, you had, dozens of weekends, and one-on-one time with Maddie and traveling to matches and stuff like that. And I feel like, especially now when it seems like every young person I see is like buried in a screen, every adult for that matter. I feel like that was probably beneficial, and I'm happy for you that you two were able to do that for all those years. Yeah.
I mean, kind of at the peak of it, we were shooting 30 to 35 matches a year.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a crazy schedule. School was a pain in the butt to deal with, depending on what school she was in. A couple of them, she transitioned from grade school to middle school and high school. Grade school was a nightmare just due to the political beliefs of the principal there. Middle school started out to be kind of a problem, but we were lucky that her school system several years prior, had a student that went through, they got picked up to be on the Olympic team for ski jumping. So they had a process in place already to allow that type of athletic training outside of the school program. So once it was brought up, so we basically got to follow the same protocol as that. So we got the excuse times off, and as long as she was able to pre-make up classes and all that kind of stuff. And then it varied from teacher to teacher. Some teachers were amazed at it, would actually, talk to her about it and ask her questions about it. And one of them actually had her calendar with shooting pictures and that stuff up in the teacher's lobby, and a bunch of the teachers used to watch her videos and ask her about them and all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
Then you'd have some other teachers that were not very supportive of that type of a community. Would not give her assignments ahead of time, just let her try and deal with it and catch up when she got back, where other ones were super helpful of letting her know what was going to be happening and giving her assignments ahead so she could work on them while we were traveling. I can't say it was all 100% happy. I mean, you spend that much time traveling on the road with either just me and her, or me, my wife Tanya, and my son. 4 of us doing road trips that frequently. That's a lot of time in a confined space. It certainly doesn't go smooth all the time. And obviously, because I was shooting at the time, as a paid participant, as well as she was, being sponsored and that kind of stuff. So I put a lot more pressure on us, than our sponsors were, expectations of performance and that kind of stuff. So that takes some of the pure enjoyment out of it, because you're not just going to shoot a match for fun.
Yeah.
Because it's when you shoot that many, it's work.
Yeah.
I mean, whether you're sponsored or not, it's work to do all the preparation to get everything together for that. So you kind of hold yourself from that to some fairly high expectations of how you can perform if you're putting this much effort into it.
Yeah, and not only the effort, but like also the financial investment too, right? Like it's not free to do all this, so you got at least the dollars invested on the line and the time invested on the line, so you do want to have a good outcome.
Yep. Yeah, so it's just a matter of trying to balance that with, you're there to enjoy it as well. I mean, I've had some of the best times I've ever had at the range, but it's also been almost considered a work process. It's not going to matches so much like, oh, this is going to be a good weekend type thing, or it's kind of like a party type thing. It's, you sign up and you get all the preparation work of getting your stuff ready to go, making sure your equipment's ready to go, you're mentally ready to go, you're practiced up, and when you get there, it's time to perform.
Yeah. Yeah. It does take a lot of effort too. So but it's definitely worth it. I feel like, it's a lot of fun. So
yeah. It's been a big transition the last year, trying to pack up for matches and not have her going because she's in college. And it's one thing to miss high school. It's another to try and miss, pre-med college. So it's definitely been different packing up and, actually going to the matches and not having her along.
Yeah. I would imagine that's a big transition, right? To go from like having that built-in match partner to like just now going solo.
Yeah.
Yeah. You dealing okay with that, Tom?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
Good. All right. Well, Tom, we've been chatting for a while here, so I'll let you get on to the rest of your day. Really do appreciate you taking the time to explain all the ins and outs of scope mounts to us, and the story of how you got into competitive shooting, as well as guiding youngsters through competitive shooting. I feel like there's a lot that people can take away from this podcast. If you got just one final thought or piece of advice for people listening, you lay it on us. What do you got?
Well, I would say you're not going to be able to spend money to buy performance on your match placement, but take the time and buy quality gear that's going to perform and run reliably, and set your rifle up to, or all your guns to fit you. Don't try and finagle yourself around to fit some improperly put together gear or something that look cool on Instagram. Make it so it fits your shooting style, and then you can perform better.
That's really good advice. Spent a lot of time messing that one up. So,
yep.
Thanks, Tom. I really do appreciate your time, and appreciate you being a part of the Three Gun Show. It's been great shooting with you over the years, and it's great to finally have you on. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
You've heard me talk for the last couple months about the Tactical Games speed and agility training that I've been doing. In case you missed it, the Tactical Games put out a program designed specifically for practical shooting sports like 3-gun, 2-gun, USPSA, etc. And they have an app, and every day there's a new workout for you to do that is focused on building speed, balance, practice, protecting your joints, and strengthening your tendons. And you just do that in your gym, your home gym, whatever you have available to you. And then you log your scores and all that stuff and get feedback from the group. If you've been on the fence about doing the program yourself, there is no better time like the new year to improve your fitness. It's really been the theme of the last bunch of shows here is how you can improve yourself, how you can evaluate what you've done and decide what you want to do better going forward. A new cycle of the Tactical Games Speed and Agility program starts the first week of January. And I've been asked to give feedback on the current program and how to improve it in the future, which is really cool. A company that cares about their clients and wants to improve their product. Imagine that. What a great world. Don't wait. Check out the link in the show notes. Sign up now and start working out with me and the rest of the crew today. The 3-Gun Show is proud to be a part of the Firearms Radio Network. If you like this type of content, help us grow the show and the shooting sports by sharing with a friend. Just open the podcast app you're using right now and hit that share button. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the range.